All right. Ready to do this, man?
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
See how this goes.
You know? Honestly, this is the least nervous I've been for a podcast. I think I was telling you, I get super nervous about them.
Yeah.
I've done, this will be 18, but I've known you for 6 or 7 months now, so that helps ease in. Everyone else has been like the first time I've ever met them.
Yeah, and it's more like an interview, right? So because you're sitting there and you're like, okay, what's this person going to think about this? And are they going to look at this thing halfway through and say, what am I wasting my time for?
Oh, wait, come on. No, it's an engaging conversation each time. No one's told me they wasted their time.
Okay,
yet,
cheers. You're on the roll.
Maybe you'll be the first. All right. Well, we got some coffee. Sitting here today, another episode of the podcast with my buddy, Johnie Roig. Thanks for doing this, man.
Of course. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So what did you think? We knew each other for about, 7 months before I even mentioned this podcast. What was your first thought when I told you this? I'm curious. Yeah, when I brought it up to you.
I felt like, that makes sense.
Okay. It makes sense for me to have one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Why?
Yeah. Because I think, Steve, you're an eclectic guy, right? And you've got an open mindset where you are really interested in knowing things and getting other schools of thought from people. And I think that you have a natural curiosity,
Yes.
right? But part of that is because you're open. You want to know different things. You want to see different things. So to hear that, I said, you know what? That's probably a perfect way for this guy to explore that curiosity and that need. You know,
Dude, are you reading my mind? Because no, you're right. I have this unusual curiosity to know things. I think it's selfishly because I want a little bit of knowledge of stuff, but also I like people's stories.
Yep.
I like their walks of life, where they came from, what they accomplished. And that's where like getting athletes on here and professional fighters and corporate leaders in the industry. We'll get into your life here, but honestly, it opened up a unique opportunity to do just that. Explore and find some people to have some cool conversations with. So sweet. I was wondering what you first thought when you're like, man, this guy and everybody else has a podcast.
Not at all. Actually, to be honest with you, with all the people out there with podcasts, I don't really know anybody that ever really does it.
Nice.
So I thought that was cool. So I looked up a couple videos and I said, man, this guy's really doing this. This is cool. This is excellent.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I listened to him for years, and I'm like, I probably was 26, 27 when I first started. I was like, I think I could do that.
Yep.
Then years go by and I never do anything. More years go by, I never do anything. So finally it got to the point where I was like, dude, you either got to do this or stop thinking about it. Yep. Yeah. But I didn't want to be 50, 60, 70 and be like, I could have done a podcast, And so here it is, man.
So let me ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I did think, so as far as the thought of you having the podcast, I got that. Yeah. Then I also thought, what are you asking me to join you for? Like, what,
Good. No. Come on. Well, I'll tell you, for real, we've had, in the little bit of time, that we've gotten to know each other here, we've had some pretty interesting conversations right off the jump. You similar have a very open mind to things. You have a specific way you think about stuff, but you're open to listening to how somebody else does, which I appreciate that about our interactions that we've had in the beginning. And honestly, man, I'm looking for more of these to do and more people to have conversations with. And we've had some really good ones off the mic. So that gets me always thinking like, shit, like I should just do one of these with people that, are cool to talk to, especially when there's so much in the world to talk about and our own lives to talk about and things like that, man.
I honestly felt flattered.
Oh, well, thank you.
I was like, that's awesome, man. That's just going to be cool. I like that.
Nice.
All right, let's see how this goes.
Cool, man. Well, let's jump right in. I got all my interview questions teed up. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. I kind of fly off the cuff here, but we got some similarities. We both worked for a few large corporations. We've led large sales teams. The good and bads of that. I think that's kind of where I shaped a lot of my perspectives of people was when you start to manage people.
Yes.
Would you agree with that from a people management standpoint?
Yep, because there's so much psychology behind it, and you really got to figure people out. You can't just have one approach. You can have one approach when it comes to people, but you got to be in a very specific organization that only wants that one approach. Right? So if it's really hard-nosed sales and close the deal and whatever, that works. It's not wrong. I don't like to get sold to that way, but it's not wrong. But if you're in the wrong environment, it is wrong.
Yeah.
You get to the right company where that's what they want, goals, numbers, at any cost, then you're in the right place. But then it comes into your morals and values and all that. But But with people in itself, man, there's so many different personalities, and having the opportunity to work with people from wide age ranges, I think has a lot to do with it. I mean, I've had teams before where I had 17-year-old kid still in high school to 66 person that's done 2 other careers and just kind of making a little bit of bucks, but highly opinionated.
Sure.
Because they've been there, done that.
Sure.
You know? And so you have to pivot. You're going to have to talk to the 17-year-old at one point. Not to discredit anybody that's young, but there's a different mindset, right? Lack of experience, different things. And then literally the next breath, you got to talk to somebody who's 3 or 4 times their age. And understanding how to navigate that. Because you can get totally different results. You know, if you don't have the right level of respect for each one.
Totally. And the way they're motivated is different. The things they're into, the stuff that's important to them, you know, completely different from a people standpoint. That's what makes, if you are going to manage a team, that's probably the good side of it. You know, there's some negatives to that too. But the other one was children, you know, and we both are fathers. You know, children really changed my perception on how I saw the world, how I thought about people. It's like now I got this little sponge that really soaks up not just what you say, but they really soak up more of what you do. And people say that and whatever, but when you really have kids and experience that, it was eye-opening, man.
No, man,
it was eye-opening.
I agree. I think that it's you know, with the kids, man, it's I always tell folks that don't have kids or people that are going to have kids, and it's like, man, if you accept the responsibility, it's one of the most enriching things you can do in your life. But you have to accept the responsibility. Sure. Not just look at it like, oh, I have this damn kid, he's a burden, or she, whatever. Right. But then it also comes into, it helps you analyze, okay, what did I like about my upbringing? Yeah. What really worked with that, and what didn't? Do I want to be anything like that or not? And then you find yourself along the path, right, of doing things that you're like, I never liked it when my father did that, and now I'm just naturally doing it. How did I absorb that? It goes back to the watching. Right. You just kind of absorb stuff, and then you think, I want to be a different parent. And then you start to, so layers of the thinking and changes that kind of make it different. Yes. It changes you.
But this is also why I wanted to talk to you, because I think we're similar in the way of maybe some introspective thinking. Your comment about what you liked, what you didn't like, and why you're acting a certain way towards your children, like that's kind of my life. Sometimes too much. Like I'm too much up in here, you know, I got to get out in the world a little bit more. But no, I mean, you're right. And not everyone should take on the responsibility of children, you know. No. I don't think it's for everybody, especially if you don't want it, like you said, you know. And I can understand that too, because it is hard and it is a responsibility, and to a degree it's a life-changing, you know, burden is a harsh word, but it's a life-changing resability that you know, there's generations of people that never had their fathers, you know, and then they have a kid and they're not around, and then they have a kid and they're not around, you know. So it's something that you, to your point, you have to want to do.
So something else too, though, is that you know, people will stay in a relationship because of a kid, and that's not the right thing to do. And that in turn can create that situation where that person's a shitty mother or father, because they really just don't want to be near the partner. Right. But it manifests itself like, I'm just gonna stay away from the house and not be present. You know, but I have this kid, so I have to be with this person, even though I'm not happy.
That's heavy though, because that's not the kid's job. No. You know, but parents put that on the kids. We're gonna stay together because we want this perception of whatever household.
It's what I'm supposed to do.
It's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, man. You know, that's a funny thing to say, because I think you spend a lot of your life in the beginning figuring out what you're supposed to be doing. And I think people go their whole life where they never maybe find what it is that they're supposed to do. Would you agree?
Most people, man. I mean, there's days, hell, I feel like I'm on a semi-decent path, but there's days where I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? What am I here for? I mean, what am I supposed to be accomplishing with this, you know? Yeah. You know, a lot of that kind of transcended from when I was in my retail career, and I really didn't feel like I was making a difference in any way in the bigger scheme of things. Like, what am I doing? You know, really, I had a leader at one point that I was, you know, I always tended to be an overachiever, wanting to do the best I could, a lot of extra pressure on myself that maybe wasn't necessary, but that's just who I am, right? And I had a leader at that point. He comes up and he's like, what are you so worried about? We sell shirts and pants, man. There's kids in third world countries doing this all day long. What are you so stressed about? And I understood what he was trying to do, get me to relax, but then it made me feel like, what are we really doing here? What am I accomplishing with this in my life? Like, how is this enriching myself? Kind of goes back to the whole people thing, though. Really, the way that it came together to justify it in my head was, I'm having an impact on my team, these people near me. That's how I'm making a difference. But I still didn't feel fulfilled by it. right? So going through and understanding that, kind of having to say, you know what, I don't want to do this because I'm supposed to. And what I found that, I heard this person on the radio one time, and they were talking about people that stop chasing their dreams and people that stop moving forward. And what those people are doing without intent is blaming their kids and family for their lack of success and their lack of initiative.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it sparked my interest, like, hold on, I'm doing that, but I love my family. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And really kind of what it comes down to is when you have these scenarios where people are saying stuff like, well, I have to make a living. This is what's providing a living for my family. So I have to do it to make sure I got food for my kids. And I got to make sure that I have this and that, the money, the resources to make these things happen. But you're not happy. So you're really blaming them for your lack of not being content with yourself. Because you're putting on the table where the bigger, greater cause, like I'm going to sacrifice my own personal health and well-being because of I need to do this for them. When the reality of it is, it does come out in those ways. And they do feel that way. Unless you don't open or talk, it manifests like that.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to go to work. Oh, man. Oh, okay, I got to work more hours to pay for this uniform or this and this and that. Or, well, I can't stop what I'm doing because then what you guys won't be able to do this and that. So, in a kind of subconscious way, you're really telling your kids, hey, I'm not happy with what I'm doing because of you.
It's your fault.
It's your fault.
Yeah. Don't you think there's something in human nature, though, that naturally has people push blame like that, though? I mean, there's something there that sometimes seems like the right reaction.
Well, I think, man, that gets into self-accountability and self-awareness.
Totally.
That's a whole nother thing, man, right? So I think most people, I always said it, man, if you can be honest with yourself, everything else will fall into place and make sense. But you got to be honest with yourself first.
Really honest.
Brutally
honest.
honest.
Yeah.
And that takes being humble, vulnerable, putting away your pride to some degree to really take in the information. Because not everything's accurate. Some people are just angry or don't like you.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right.
Take that for what it's worth.
Exactly.
You don't know what their life's like, where they came from. Yeah.
Right. But without having that introspective, you're always going to find that you'll end up pointing blame at other people because you're not just going to own the decision, right?
That seems easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems easier than looking in the mirror and realizing that maybe it's yourself that's the problem or part of the problem, maybe.
So I think a good example of that is okay, we have customers in our business, right, with the corporate we work for. And so I would always say, well, Johnny, you got to be empathetic. Put yourself in their shoes. And I always felt like, well, that doesn't always work for me because if I was in their shoes, I knew that my payment was late, and I know I'm going to have a late fee. And I accept that because I know the terms I signed up for. So for me, why am I going to fight and kick and scream over a late fee when I knew that was going to happen because of my decision or my inability to make the payment? Even if it was out of my control, that's still my responsibility.
That's back to the self-accountability that you hold on yourself that not everybody does.
No.
So
it's hard.
It's hard.
Right?
It's hard. But let's back to the what your dreams or your pursuit, what would be yours if you didn't have to work? And again, I have badmouthed corporations in the past for different reasons, for different reasons. But they're a necessity. We need them. I'm not going to go down that road. Nope. But if you could do anything, what would be Johnny's dream?
Johnny's dream would be to do something in the creative world, right? Whether it be, so my dream growing up, I wanted to be a millionaire and an artist.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I would tell me
money was there.
Money. I wanted to be a millionaire because in my mind I equated that if you had money, you could do what you wanted. It was a freedom kind of thing in my mind. It wasn't for having stuff. It just felt like people are working because they have to, not because they want to, kind of like this. So I want to be a millionaire so I don't have to worry about money. Now, granted, a million's not the same thing now as it was back then.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to be an artist, right? Yeah. That was what it was. And so through that, I interesting things that just kind of happen in life, man. So always was drawing, painting, really, really creative with that kind of stuff like that. Multimedia, art, just kind of putting things together. Then it transcended into getting into kind of music, DJing, poetry with emceeing and stuff like that.
Nice.
And doing all these different things. But it just kind of, it's life grabs a hold of you, man, and that's when I fell into working and doing things and realized, man, I'm not pursuing my dreams or the things, not even about dreams. It's about just doing. I still feel the urge that I need to be creative and I'm not, right? I think about it constantly. Once you're an artist, you're an artist. You can't think about it constantly, but I don't produce. right? And I'm working through that, trying to figure out why. You know, that's one of the reasons I was excited about this. This is an art form, right? And kind of expression.
It is. For sure, totally. Yeah.
And my goal for art was I always wanted to just impact people, right? So I always kind of thought of art as being the physical manifestation of emotion, right? So emotions they're not tangible. They're just emotions. You think, you feel, you come and go. But art is taking that emotion and making it tangible, making it real, something you can touch, see, look at, hear, and have an impact on it. Because that's really what the best art is. It moves people. Yeah. It creates either controversy or enlightenment or motivation. There's something that comes from art, and that's why art's just so important in life. I think I've always felt that. When I see art programs disappearing from schools and stuff, I get pissed. Yeah. I'm like, what? This is important. This part of our people as a being, I think, is important, the creative to express. But I think what happens is we get stifled from expression. That's not real, right? You start. Myself growing up, yeah, it's great. You're really good at art. You know, in hindsight, I don't believe we should have regrets, but it's okay to have things you might do differently in life.
Sure.
Right?
That's a good way to put it.
So one of the things that I would do differently is when I was going through high school, the only constant in school was art class. Constant. Always had top marks, grades all throughout. It's the only class that I never left school for. Like I had almost perfect attendance in art, even though I would show up just for art and then leave. Right? Most of the time.
Right. Once art was done, you were out?
I'm done. I did what I wanted to do. The rest of this stuff sucks. I don't want to do this, right? So
this math and science, English is useless.
So anyhow, thinking about getting out of high school, the natural progression should have been, or you would think would have been, right? I don't want to say what it should have been because I'm happy with who I am today because life is, everything that I've done has made this and it's still growing and moving, right? But the natural thought process was I should have went to art school, which is the most natural thing. But instead, I was thinking about, well, what's going to make money? What's going to be a career? What's something, because it was almost like, well, art, nobody ever encouraged. They encouraged the talent, but not encouraged, you really have a future in this. You should look into this. You should do that. So I was left to figure it out myself. And I'm not, again, self-accountability.
Sure.
Right? Could I have had people, adults, my parents, other people that I knew as adults kind of reinforce that, and they didn't? No, they didn't, but that's okay, right? Because I should have had that inside of myself kind of see that. I just didn't have that guidance.
They had their own stuff going on.
No, absolutely.
I think when I was a kid, and I might have said this to you before, I used to have this feeling that, you know, adults have the answers. Like, oh, they know. Or when I'm an adult, I'll know.
Yeah.
But the older I get, nobody has any of the answers. Oh, everybody's trying to figure out exactly what we're talking about here. So, you know, to sit back and you could think, you know, and I think about this with my own children, is trying to push them in ways that maybe I wished I would have gotten pushed into or supported in. You know, that's the way to give back. But more importantly, finding a way to bring that into your own life now. You know, it's like it's never too late kind of conversation. A lot of people say that. I saw this 90-year-old lady get on the back. She was on some stunt show that my kids were watching. 90-year-old lady gets on the back of a dirt bike with her grandson, and he runs through like 7 or 8 flaming pallets in the rain. Dude, it was sketchy. She's 90. But she gets off, and her message was, it's never too late to do what you want to do. And I'm like, man, from a 90-year-old, like, she's right. Like, I'm 34 now, so I'm always thinking, like, man, I got to move faster. I'm getting too old. Like, I got to keep doing all this stuff. But it's not true, man. It's never too late.
No, it isn't. And there's a lot of actors and stories of real big companies, corporate success, man, that people started in their 60s, right? Or actors that you feel like you've always known them on the stage. You've always seen them in movies, and there are the stars. They've always been that star, but they really didn't get their first real paying gig till they were 48 or something. You know, there's a lot of stories like that where you're like, dang, but look at what they did. They did it. It's just about the timing, right? The timing was right for that moment and stuff like that. So I think if we're going to go back to the whole, I kind of deferred myself from those dreams in a lot of ways, right? And even though I was in school and I wasn't in art school, I was always still drawing, even through adulthood and doing stuff. I was heavy into graffiti at one point and got into fine art and all kinds of stuff, right? So just being a little vandal, right?
But graffiti could be vandalous, but some of it does look pretty dope, man. It's dope.
I love it. Dope, not all there's trash out there, but it's like any other art, right?
Or anything.
Exactly, man. So I don't really kind of know, man, where that separated in a way. Because I mean, my friends and family, they see me as an artist, And they know that I have that, and that's the way they perceive me, because they see how I think and how I look at things, and it's always the joke. I'm an artiste. I don't have time for that. But I think we just get caught up.
Sure.
Right? We get caught up in the world, and I think where we cross that path, where it starts to impact us, and we start to feel less vigor for life, right? And less like, oh, what am I doing? What's my because we fall away. You don't also thinking about reality, right? I don't know if it's America or what it is, but you feel like if I do it, I have to be the best, and I got to be the top of the list for it. I got to be famous, world renowned. So why even start? So people feel like they have to do so much with it, and really you just have to do it.
Do you think that's ego a little bit?
A little bit.
But you're right. I mean, there is this, if you're going to do something, you should be the best.
Right.
But, and similar story here, because I'm like, man, I'll never, and again, I have no aspirations to think this is going to be anything other than learning for me, which is valuable in itself, right? But you have this thought like, oh, I shouldn't even start because it's never going to be this. It's never going to make this. But once I was able to erase that, I was like, dude, just do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And what it brings selfishly from an experience standpoint, and this is open doors that I would have never even imagined already in a short amount of time. So I hear you. It's a matter of figuring out what that thing is, and then putting time and resources, mostly the resource of time, behind it.
Yeah.
But that becomes the hard part.
Yeah,
that becomes the hard part.
So I have notebooks and stuff, and I'll sit down and I'm like, I'm going to sketch today. But I always feel like there's a distraction, right? There was a time when it was, like anything else, you refine your skills and you get really good. And you can just, it'd be like, just draw it how it looks. That's how it looks. To grab a piece of paper, draw this whole thing just how it looked, because that's how it looks. That's how you do it. Just put the lines in, the shadows, the shapes, and all that. Well, that skill dulls over time. So sitting down now to draw something or put something together, the process just takes longer. Whereas before, the process was this little because you just did it so much, it was muscle memory, and you can just define it in the brain physically into making it happen. Where now it's like, man, I sit here and try to draw this table, the corner of the table, I'd be erasing and constantly redoing new sheets because my process. Because with art, you see how you'll see the let's say with drawing specifically, you see the circles, and then you draw shapes of the circles, but the circles are really light. But that person's going over those circles over and over, adding more detail, refining, erasing, tweaking over and over and over until it becomes a face, a portrait, right? That's the process. So if you're in practice, that process becomes very fluid, and you can do it very quickly. Then eventually you're not even using the circles because you already know the shape of the anatomy, and you're just kind of putting it together. So you're skipping those steps, and it's faster, and you can do it. So what I'm getting to with that is my process is dull. So just drawing the simplest thing takes a while, and I feel like I have to be so immersed into it to be focused and concentrated on it, but there's always a distraction. But again, am I just blaming everybody else for not sitting down? I don't know.
There will always be distractions, and that's back to some people have a bad perception of if you have an ability to compartmentalize, right, in your brain. What you're doing technically should be what you're putting your energy and effort into. You can't, if you're thinking about too much about what happened earlier, you can't do anything about it. If you're thinking about too much what's gonna happen, you can't do anything about that either. So if you can compartmentalize those things and say that what I'm doing with this amount of time is what I'm doing. To me, that seemed to help me from not letting distractions stop me. But to your point, it's a work in progress.
Oh, it's a work in progress.
It's a constant work in progress.
Yeah. So, kind of struggling too with that whole piece of what happened. I don't want to blame my family for me not doing things that I want to do. I'm only going to blame myself for not taking action and just doing it. Doesn't have to be a lot. It could be just doodling on the napkin at the restaurant. That's enough. Just doing something to be creative and express.
And that would probably bring you some happiness.
It's like a dopamine, endorphin kind of thing that's like, it makes me feel like, yes, it feels physically good to create things,
That's cool, man. But so many people search for that thing, and they never find it, or it gets swept away just in the aspect of life, right? And I fear that for my children a little bit. My daughter's very artistic. My son's big into football. I know your kids got a lot of stuff going on too, but I'm fearful that I want them to do that now, but not lose that joy One thing about all the fishing for me was, dude, it just made me feel like being a kid again.
Yeah.
I didn't fish since I was like a kid. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this podcast, but I have nobody that pays attention. So let me start filming all these fishing videos.
Yeah.
Once I get to a certain number, I'm going to start doing podcasts. But the big thing was, it just made me feel like I was a kid again. And I was doing something that was, you know, not creative to an extent because you're filming and editing and things like that, but mostly just being outside, which was the best part. So now I find myself just trying to be a child again all the time.
Just to connect to that feeling.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I think with the kids, a big thing for me, so my older daughter, very, very talented, not because she's just my kid, she's just very smart, talented, and gifted, has a brain for the sciences, has a brain for the arts, plays multiple instruments fluidly, you know, very creative, draws and stuff like that, but can break down, you know, chemistry compounds and stuff kind of fluidly. So she came to the crossroads of, you know, got to go to college. I'm going to do this thing. Okay, first of all, do you want to go to college? Was the question. Is that the route you feel is going to be right for you? That investment in time and money and resources. Not you have to go to college. The generation I came from, college, that's why when I went to college first time, it's because I was supposed to. Not because I knew I was there. I was just supposed to go to college.
Even though you're wasting time, you're supposed to be there.
Supposed to be there,
exactly.
Right? That's why I got kicked out of school. That's a whole other story, right? So anyways, when she came to that point, and we said, look, you need to go to school for what you want to go to school for, right? What do you want to do? I personally, I'm a little biased, but I think you should go to school for music because that's the artist in me. And I don't want you to ever feel, and my thing was be careful. You know, like you're talking the other day with the dads that make their kids do the sports and they got to force them to live through their life, you know, right? So I was making sure.
You didn't want to do that.
I didn't want to do that to her. Yeah. But that's where I was like, but my whole point was, don't worry about what you're going to do with it. You're going to have a much more enjoyable experience while you're learning those things. And at the end of the day, most people that go to college, they don't know, their degrees aren't necessarily in what they're doing. They just have the paper, which the only qualification is a bachelor's degree. Unless it's a very specific thing, most times it's not a bachelor's degree or this level of education specifically in this, and this.
Right.
You just have to have the degree.
Right.
So a lot of people, for example, in my retail world, I mean, they had culinary degrees, the anthropology degree. They just had the degree, and that's what got them the place. Yeah. So my thought process was, look, you have a much better time in college, right? And even if you don't do anything with it professionally, you will feel fulfilled because you accomplished that and you're done. You won't feel like you left it behind, which that's me and my own lessons where maybe if I would have gone to art school, and even if I wasn't doing anything with it, I just still feel like that's something I should have done. Why didn't I do that? Right. you know? Yeah. So, and I explained all this to her, though. That's also the part of it, being open. Yeah. So let me explain to you, this is also, just like I said, this is where this is probably coming from. This is where I'm thinking and what's going on.
But that's where that introspective look comes in, and then relaying that information to your children to do with what they want. Yes. You know, and again, I think it took me longer in life to realize that my parents were trying to give me that kind of stuff. You know, I look back at it now, but I try to do that with my kids. Like not live through them, like we were talking about those dads that are forcing their kids that clearly don't want to be there. Like, you know, you don't want to do that.
How many kids are going to be doctors and lawyers that have no interest in that at all because of their culture? Yeah. They're being forced to do that.
Or that's what their dad did or their mom did or whatever. Yeah, so let me ask you this. If it was, you know, Johnny of today, would you rather still be that, let's say, multimillionaire now, or would you rather be able to pay your bills and be an artist?
Pay my bills and be an artist.
Right. Yep. So that what changed for you on that perception of money? Would you think? Because that one, when you said that, I was like, I think I had that same ambition where I felt like I had to have a bunch of money, and I'm not so sure that's the case.
It's not. It helps, right?
Sure.
Money helps a lot. So, man, I think that where that came from was just like, I always saw my parents always worked, right? And so you had to work. And I would see that, especially after my brother was born, things changed in the house, right? And it wasn't, my father was in the military, you know, so it wasn't, so he had a great career in the military, but military does not, you can get to certain ranks and stuff that'll pay you a pretty penny and get all there, but that's not what it was. So there was just things that I wanted that I weren't able to get because we didn't have the money. Shoes, I wanted clothes, I wanted certain things at that time that it was just as a kid, I saw other kids with it, but I couldn't get it.
And you felt left out.
And I felt left out, right? So I'm feeling like, okay, what do you need to have those things? Well, at that time, if you were a millionaire, you were a millionaire. It was like this thing where you were, It wasn't about status and stuff. As a kid, I didn't understand that. I just understood that if you were a millionaire, what I saw on the 3 or 4 channels that we could get at that time and stuff like that, the people that were respected and doing things were millionaires.
Right.
That was the goal. And all of a sudden, this was what? Probably, you're looking at late 80s, where you're talking about money was king, everybody wanted to be a yuppie and all this other stuff. So, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of where it came from with that. And then that actually, it's funny, I forgot about that portion of that dream up until, oh man, maybe 10 years ago. I was talking about my dad, my father, and he says, we're talking about life. I don't know what we're talking about, because we had a lot of good conversations, but we also didn't. So it was kind of what we were talking about. And he says, remember when you just always wanted to be an artist and be a millionaire? Do you remember that? And I always remembered the artist part, but I completely forgot about the millionaire part. Yeah. Right? And so that's where, going back to the question, it just changed, where it's not about that. So I've seen, met people who are still doing music, still doing art. And it's a tough life, right? I don't want to say it's a tough life. It's a tough life depending on your perception.
Sure.
Because they have this certain fulfillment that money can't buy. They just can't go buy a brand new even Honda Accord because they just can't afford it.
Right.
But they're doing what they love every day. And there's a layer of respect and stuff that comes from that in that community. That takes the place of the money to some degree.
But it seems like even people with a lot of money, I remember the first CEOs I've ever met, private jet kind of money. You start to meet some of these people, great people, but if you do get a one-on-one, like intimate conversations, like, they don't seem maybe as fulfilled as you would think.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it finally struck for me. The word you just said is fulfillment seems like what the search should be for, not necessarily money. And then it seems like I don't remember who said it, but like if you live your life in the lens of I have to make all this money, like you're going to miss the picture. You're going to miss what it's all actually about. And I think what life is actually about is very subjective to an individual, but I think fulfillment, like what can you do with your time that's going to make you feel at the end of the day when it's your time to go that like I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish.
Doing what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, right?
Purpose.
Like, purpose.
Yeah. But do you actually think everybody has a purpose? This is a loaded question because I don't know. I don't know. But what do you think?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of damn people.
Yeah, man. And do you start crossing a line of being judgmental over one's choices if you feel like you're deciding they don't have a purpose? I don't know, right?
Well, people make that decision through, I guess, abortions all the time, or murder. Not to go down a sad road, but that's essentially what that's saying. This person has no purpose, I guess, to an extent.
Well, okay. So if we look, I think that looking at it like that, man, I think that you have to choose to have a purpose. Right?
Sure.
Because if you don't choose to have a purpose or believe, then you don't believe you have a purpose. Right. Who's going to give you a purpose?
Right.
It kind of comes from a life experience or something you just kind of connected where you feel good at and you decide, this is my purpose. I'm here for this. This is what I'm here for. However that comes. But you still have to decide at some point that you want that to be your purpose. So I think that when you start getting into people who don't necessarily have a purpose because they've never either been encouraged or have self-insights or just never cared, then their life doesn't mean anything to them. And they start doing, or life in general doesn't. Then they start making these other decisions. Right? Because somebody's purpose could be, depending on their age, could change and all that stuff too, right? There's people out there whose whole purpose, they want to be Tony Montana. They want to sell as many drugs as possible, make as much money, have guns, and just do
Say hello to my little friend, I'm with you,
That's their purpose right now. They believe that shit with their heart and souls, that's what I'm here for. Now, is that a good purpose to have?
Debatable.
Who decides, right?
It's subjective, it's subjective. But you're right, purpose is a choice, but sometimes you have to be, I guess, self-critical enough to be like, oh yeah, this is my purpose. Then to be able to adjust as you get older, as you realize things. But I like that, man. Purpose being a choice, and not everybody chooses to have a purpose.
And you can look at it and get into the realms of religion. Oh, God blesses everybody with a gift. Yeah, but what if they don't recognize it? What if they don't understand what that gift is and it never gets opened? Well, God's not down the hall. We can't knock on the door.
Don't you think religion is sort of that for people. Like this finds them purpose, like whether it's there's a life after this, if I do all these good things, and again, we don't need to bash religion. I don't bash religion. I bash certain aspects of it that I don't necessarily agree with, which is, I think, and everybody's right to do so. Absolutely. But I do think there is some good to it because it does give people this divine sense of purpose. And maybe that's good, a net positive ultimately for the individual.
If they feel good about it, then it is.
Right.
Because they're not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
But we can get into the whole religion.
No. This is an open forum.
So I think that if it's truly in a spiritual state where you're there to encourage others to be the best they can be, and encourage their talents and encourage them by connecting them to whatever higher purpose, and they can reinforce their natural abilities through that higher purpose and all that good stuff, I think, okay, that's appropriate.
Right.
But when you start making somebody feel that they're not worthy, or that their purpose that they believe in is garbage because it conflicts with what your religious doctrine is or whatever, that's not healthy. No. I don't think that's a good purpose to have, but you can't tell that individual that because to them, their purpose is to relay this message. And if people don't get it, that's because they need more of the message, not because they just aren't with it.
But then there's people that take it that's their purpose is then to spread that message. And they need to convert people like me. But like I'll open those. I like having conversations with people, but I think the problem becomes they don't see others' perspectives. Like they don't put themselves in someone else's shoes and realize why they think a certain way or why they don't.
So even talking about purpose, I've read a couple things where these different very, very, very spiritual people, and this just came to me right now as we're talking about it, and I can't quote the person that did it, but they said there is no purpose. The purpose is to just be. But the problem is that we get so caught up in needing to have a purpose that now we're stressed out about it because we're thinking about not fulfilling our purpose in the past, which is depression, and are we going to be able to fulfill whatever this purpose is in the future? We don't know what it is.
Which is anxiety. Exactly.
So, I mean, again, it comes down to you have to choose what purpose you want it to be. And if your purpose is to just be and absorb life and experience as many people and things as you can in life, and that's your purpose, well, then that's up to you now.
Then you're winning. I think that's winning if you can ultimately get to that point.
I do. Now, what if you can't meet that? That's your goal. That's your purpose. You got it, right? Yeah. But you need money to do it. Right? You want to travel.
Do you? I mean, and this comes in my argument with money. And I've said on here a couple of times that I have this love-hate relationship with money. I love it because it brings you stuff that you need, even if it's not the fancy things that sometimes you want. It brings you what you need: house, clothing, food, vehicles. Obviously, it brings you the stuff you need. But the hate comes in is you need it for all of those things. And there's a long history of people, cultures, civilizations where that wasn't the case. You could get those things in other ways. You could be more of a community. You could trade more goods and services. And I'm not saying we go back to Indian and caveman times by any means, but there's a degree of that probably you're less anxious about certain things, but you're probably more anxious about, man, are the hunters going to bring food back today? Like right. I'm a water getter. My job is to go bring water back. That guy's going and getting the buffalo or whatever. Yeah. But I think that people get too caught up in how much money they have. It's a status symbol, like you said, what they can buy, and no hate to people that want $500 million yachts or whatever they want to spend their money on. Like, that's cool. But for me, it just seemed like when I lived that way, where I was like, I have to have this salary, I have to make this much money, other things in my life suffered. Yeah, man. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Something that you said, man, that stood out to me is that you have to spend time getting resources.
Yes.
And that the way you position that resonated with me. Like, yes, because instead of going to get water or killing the buffalo or finding the fruits and vegetables, which was hunter-gatherer, that's how primitively, it was surviving. We just were, right?
Yes.
Well, now we don't do that. No. We have to get money to get the buffalo that's already processed at the store. We have to get money to get the fruits that have been flown in from wherever.
Yes.
And all this other stuff.
Yes.
So when you look at it that way, it kind of tweaked money's resources, and that's all that it kind of is. But when you start placing, I think, in my opinion, because there's people whose purpose They love money. They just love to have the money. They love this, but it's fulfilling that status.
Yes.
I think they're still trying to fill a hole with money, right?
Sure. A hole in their own hearts or hole in their own whatever.
More money, that's why they're not happy when they have even all the money and success, right?
Yeah.
So I think, man, it's money's just an interesting thing, man. And getting those things together and understanding what it can do for you is important, because it is important. Money's important.
Yeah.
Now, is it everything? No. Now, what do you think? Can money buy you happiness?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
I think it can buy you time to do what makes you happy. Okay. That's what I think money can do. Yeah. If you have X amount of dollars that you don't have to spend 60 hours a week, the more you move that away from you, the less it's going to pick you up. Just so you know.
I'm just not trying to be right on it, because I keep leaning in.
You're good, man. Like, you see where I'm at. I'm right here. I'm like, I'm hoping it's picking you up.
Okay,
no, you're good. You're good. And that made me lose my my train there on because you keep sliding that thing forward. I'm like, it's going to be on my side here in no time. But go ahead.
So the money, right? Yeah. You're talking about money, happiness, and
yes, having an X amount would make it so you don't have to spend 60 hours of your week doing something you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. So if you know what brings you fulfillment, having a certain amount of money, to me, the biggest resource is time.
Yeah.
And I was talking to this guy last night that time is a made up thing, but it's a real thing, but it's a made up thing, just like money, you know?
Yep.
But the ultimate resource is time. So if you have money to know your bills are covered, your house is paid for, whatever, then you don't have to spend so much time trying to gain more money. Yeah. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
Maybe that, in that sense, it can bring you happiness, but just having a bunch of money won't bring you happiness, I don't think.
I agree with you, man.
You agree with that?
I do. I think you have to be fulfilled to a certain degree in order for money to enhance your current happiness, right?
Yeah.
It's because, again, it provides you with more of the resources. My whole object is to make the most amount of money as I can, working the least amount of time, so that I can do what I want when I want all the time, right? Yes. Now, the coolest thing would be to be able to do what I want when I want all the time, and that makes me a bunch of money, because then I'm just being.
Yes. Right? And now that is the goal.
Yeah.
Find something that you like to put your time into, that has a return on that investment, that gives you enough money to live whatever lifestyle you want to live, or however comfortable you want to be from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, man. So I've there's people out there that just they work a lot of hours, man. A lot of hours to get a certain amount of money on their paycheck, and it's like, okay, but what are you doing outside of that? Do you have any hobbies? Do you have any things you like to do? What are you really working for? Is it are you as all your resources, right? Because that's what the money is, being absorbed into your lifestyle, even if whether it's absorbing it or not, doesn't have to be. But is what you're doing and what you've created, this where you need all this money, is that what it is? So what are you really doing with your time? Are you having any time to do what you want? Right. Now, it's also coming from a mindset of somebody that has a hard time. If I'm at work and there's nothing to do, I'd rather go home and do nothing.
Sure.
Where some people can sit at work doing nothing and be happy they're getting paid just doing nothing.
Maybe some of those people don't want to go home. There's that side too. No. But I hear you. And you got to work. You got to make some money. You got to put time into something to get the resource of money, because you just simply have to.
Yep.
But those kind of things, and I don't know if I'm crazy in this, bother me. I don't like, and this is probably just me, I don't like to be forced to do anything.
Oh, man.
If I choose to do it, that's a different conversation. But that's why I think I have this hard time with the concept of money, because you're essentially in today's technological times and everything that we have today, if you aren't making money, then what are you doing? What do you have? You can't have anything.
In our society, you may not have anything at all.
You can't have anything.
You can't. Yeah. Period.
And if you have a family, you can't be a homeless person. I mean, people do that have families. You see them on the side of the road putting their kids out there trying to collect money. But for me, that's not something I want for them. So I took a long time off of working, as you know, and back to it now, and it's a good thing. It's ultimately a good thing for the right reasons. But this time, still putting in the time to what I find brings me fulfillment, and that's the kids first and foremost. It would be probably the ocean and fresh water second, and then maybe the podcast I put there, from a fulfillment standpoint.
Right on. I think that so for my example, my being in retail, and I quit retail. And I feel like I would have to have not to go back into retail in the store level to do that, right? I would have to have not eaten for 10 days. My kid's not eating for 5. Like, it's got to be an extreme thing. Right?
The bank's calling on the house.
Everything's falling apart.
Yeah, I hear that, man.
Because I just was not happy. Now, part of that's with what you're saying. I'm cool with that. And I decided that I'm not doing anything I don't want to do. I essentially said reset. No. Cashed out every bit of life savings I had. Took about a year off. Dabbled in a couple of different things and really kind of understood that it was like, I never want to do that again. And a couple of things I dabbled in, I didn't love them.
Right.
I didn't love them. I didn't like it. And I said to myself, that's why I quit. Why am I going to get into something else I don't like to do?
Right.
Yeah. Then I found the current opportunity with what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. Yeah. And that's really what it is. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
Bro, we would have never met each other, man. Come on. No, but that's what some of these doors open up, more relationships. And that was the other thing I realized that I wasn't putting enough resources into, of the resource of time, into relationships with, my family always, my extended family, you met some of my family. I've always done well with putting time into that. But outside of that, like, I'm the guy that, like, won't reach out to somebody for years, when it wouldn't be that hard for me to do. So I'm realizing as I'm getting older that, like, that resource is valuable to spend the time to do different things with individuals. You have to put time into relationships if you want to have them. You want to have them.
You do. And so I think going back to what you said, though, it's a two-way street.
Sure.
Those cats you haven't reached out to for years, they could have reached out to you too.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it. Yeah.
That doesn't mean to push them away, but maybe it's time to reach out, try to make the connection.
Yes.
But if the connection's not there, it's not there.
Sure.
Right? So
can't force it.
You can't force it, man. They got to want to be a part of your life like you want to be a part of theirs.
Back to that force conversation. But you're right. Relationships are a two-way street, and they take work. It's just like your relationship with your wife or your kids. Like, it's not, the love is given, but other than that, like, it takes work and energy and effort and time and communication. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of people miss in today's day and age, is the ability to do what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Have an opinion, share it, but more importantly, listen to someone else's opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's social media that's changed that, maybe just technology in general, where everybody's opinion are limited, they're closed down. And that scares me for my own children a little bit, and that's why I have a lot of these conversations with them. My kid, we've done podcasts with the kids almost a couple a year, because we want to look at them. I don't put them out there, but in the future. Like, wouldn't you love to be able to? Yeah. So we've done a few, like 7 or 8 with the kids or whatever, but it opens dialogue between us, and I think that's what kids and adults need more of. I think communication would solve a lot of the problems that we see in the world.
A whole lot. And I think the problem, man, with that is that it's a two-way street again, right? So you got to be able to listen as much as you output. Take it in as much as you put it out, right? And I think most people, they want to put it out, but they don't want to take the time to really listen to what's coming back at them. Because they just already wrote it off in their head or their minds or whatever. Right.
But it was sales that made me realize that listening is a skill. You know where I'm coming from? But because selfishly, you could use that to your advantage. You could ask the right questions to get them to say the right things, and it's like, okay, and you make a recommendation on whatever you're selling or whatever you're adding. Makes sense, right? But it's a skill that can be learned.
Yes.
If it's for the right reasons. And I'm not saying sales is the right reason, but it helped me realize, like shit, like, you can do this with everybody. Like, just listen to what they're saying if they have an opinion on something, and, use your both ears you have for a reason.
So, my wife and I, I've learned the skill of listening, right?
Through her.
Well, I said it's a loaded thing, right? You could probably get a whole other situation going on, man. So there's times where
I got Monica right here.
This will really get exciting. So, man. So the thing is that if you ask her, she'll tell you that I don't listen, because I always just want to do what I want. Don't tell Johnny. You can't tell Johnny what to do, because he's gonna do whatever he wants, And it's true to some degree, right?
Mine would say the same.
It's if he doesn't want to do something, he's not gonna do it.
Totally.
He's just not. It's just nobody's gonna move him. Maybe the kids can, but if he doesn't want to do something, he's not gonna do it.
The kids got the best chance.
Yeah, they do. They actually do, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk and. A good example, listening to a news story on the TV, right? We're kind of going, and I'm listening, and I'm listening. And she has a habit of, as soon as she sees the headline, she starts talking about it, or somebody says a comment and she just starts going in talking about it. And I'm always like, stop. I want to hear the rest of the story to hear. They might be answering your question, but you're too busy talking. Let's get all the information, listen, and then let's chew on it, right? But that's hard for people who aren't used to understand or haven't developed that skill of being able to take it in and really digest it first before just reacting.
Yes.
So it creates some tensions when we're trying to watch TV or do stuff, or sometimes having conversations. And nothing, my wife and we have a fantastic relationship, right? So nothing, it's normal stuff. Sure. But there's times where I'm like, you have to listen. You have to stop and let me finish what I'm going to say. And that nothing drives her more crazy. It triggers her like that, right?
I can see that.
And like, you got to let me finish my thought, and then give me what you want to say. I'm up to talk. I'm not just trying to tell you that you're winning in this and that, but I also have this thing where when I have an opinion, I'm open to being swayed.
Right.
But that's your job.
Right.
This is my opinion.
Right.
This is what I think. This is why I think this way.
Yeah.
If you want me to think differently, I'm open to it, but you got to plead the case.
Yes.
But I will listen.
But listen to mine.
Mine.
Really listen.
Yes.
And that's the funny thing about people with opinions is, and you can look at politics, you can look at religion, you can go down the list of opinions that people have, but they get married to it. And they won't ever change it. Man, I have changed so many opinions on things like as I gain more knowledge over time, over research, over anything. I think your opinion should be fluid, and certain ones you want to hold from a values standpoint, sure, things that are important to you. But I think everything else is, the more knowledge we get as a species helps, with forming some opinions, I would think.
It does, man. I think the more you experience, right? So you'll, like a lot of military personnel and military dependents, they have a more open view of the world because they're traveling and seeing and just being exposed to so much more.
Right.
That it's like, oh, okay, what I thought wasn't anything like it really is now that I'm actually here. Yeah. So because they're kind of forced to deal with all these things, tend to have a little bit of an open mind with maybe culture and people and accepting of people. Plus thinking about the military in itself, it's all different kinds of races and groups, people working together for one job. Sure. Right? So, but then you come across folks that have not had any exposure, and this isn't knocking anybody that grew up in a town. Right? I intentionally stayed where I stayed to have my daughters grow up in a town. That's why I wasn't relocatable with any of my jobs. Right. I didn't have that. I moved around a lot. Yeah. So it was important for me for them to have a hometown. Stability. Yeah. It's important, right? And but the part of my job was also to not let them feel that this was their whole world. No. And bringing in my experiences and helping them understand, look, you got to look at things differently. Everybody's cool. You just got to be cool. Right? To kind of get that together and be open. Now, some people, you're not going to dig what they have to say. And you don't have to agree with everybody. You don't have to like everybody. No. Right? It's a nice fantasy to think everybody's going to like each other, but that's not the reality.
That is not the world.
No, it's not. It's not real, right? Yeah. But be open to that.
Yes.
And I think what happens is you get a lot of folks who don't necessarily understand how to open that up. And I'll be careful when I say these things because I don't want to sound like arrogant, like, oh, I'm open. It's not that. It's just that I've met so many people and done so many things that it's important to understand those opportunities that come from that stuff. But be open to it, right? Right. So kind of thinking about closed-minded. People I've met, fantastic people living in different places as an adult. And I would look at these guys and gals, and they were born and raised wherever I was at. And everywhere we went, they just knew everybody because they were born and raised there. And it's like, man, you've got so many resources and connections to do whatever you want with all these people that you are friends with. I mean, they're not going to look at you like you're trying to get over on them. They're friends with you. They care for you. But you feel like you don't have any opportunities because you just don't understand that you're here. Whereas I'm looking at it from the outside in, like, I wish I had a community of people I knew. I wish I had that ability to connect with that many people. And I was always kind of alone, figuring it out at that moment because we're always new. Was always new moving around.
New town, new school, new everything.
Everything. Yeah. So that's why with my daughters, it was important. Grow up here, and it's happened. It's come to fruition. They're getting older. They have their childhood friends. They know the community. Do they want to live where we live? Not really, because it's a small town, and they want to.
That's a good town, man. I like that.
I love it. I love it there, man.
That town.
I love it there. But also where I'm at in my life, right?
Sure. They're in a different space.
Totally different space.
Totally different space.
At 22, 23, I would have not enjoyed. I would have spent most of my time in Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville.
I was 23 when I bought my first house in that town. That's funny. But no, I hear where you're coming from. I hear where you're coming from. Yeah.
They just want that whole thing. But anyhow, I think I got off track with what we're saying, man. But just kind of going with that. People need to be just open. And I guess we're going back to the whole listening piece. And it's a skill. But listening doesn't always have to be verbal, I think.
Sure.
I think open your eyes and you're listening with just your senses, looking around and listening to what's going on around you visually and observing. That's all listening. And that's going to be able to sit there and say, like right now, all this rain, I love the shade of green that comes out on the leaves this time of year. There's that subtle just adjustment. I love that brightness and everything. And I'm looking around like, man, everything's beautiful. Yeah, the trees look nice. I said, oh, man, look at the colors. Did look at it. That's listening to what's happening and thinking about, okay, I know my allergies are about to be on fire because everything's about to blow up. Something like that.
That's the downfall.
Yeah, that's the downfall to it, man. But anyways, just being open-minded is important, but it's hard because not everybody necessarily either innately has that ability to be open-minded or they haven't been taught to be open-minded because I think it can come from both directions.
When you're closed-minded, again, that probably seems simpler. It seems simple to have a closed-minded approach, and you can see that with people that grew up in religion, but even, to a degree of what we're talking about opportunities, you see people that grow up like the spoiled rich kid that's in and out of drug rehab and, like they get to 17, 18, 20, 25, and they just, they're not a productive member of society. Some people would argue. But then you got the opposite side of that where you got these kids that they had no dad and all they had was basketball, soccer, art, whatever, and they end up like breaking away from that. They use that to channel it as an outlet to become maybe a more productive member of society or something that brings them fulfillment. So then that kind of opens up the question of how much suffering do people have to realize how good it is? You know what I mean? Like some people, if you never suffer, like if you've never had any suffering, then you have no perspective. You have nothing to compare it to. But you have people that suffer too much. I think there's a balance of how much suffering maybe a human is supposed to endure. Man, would you agree?
Sort of, right? So I think that I've learned a lot of things by watching other people mess up.
For sure.
Right?
Good. That's a good call.
So it's even just being, I think it comes into something in your mind as a switch. And I bet you if we had some award-winning psychiatrist, they could break it down, tell us exactly what this thing is. You know what I mean? But it's just us. So
it's the lack of mushrooms. That's what it is. If you have mushrooms, that switch gets flipped. And if you get to DMT and ayahuasca, then you get all the switches.
That's it. And you become the table, and you become the walls, and everything's cool.
You become one with everything. Your perspective is opened.
So yeah, I think people do learn from suffering, and that teaches us lessons, right? I mean, I've made mistakes with money, or made mistakes with different decisions and choices with relationships that it hurt.
Totally.
I don't want to do that again. So I'm not going to. But I've also have that thing inside of me. This is where it comes into each individual where I've seen other people make mistakes that I'm like, I don't ever want to be a part of that.
True.
Right? Seen decisions my parents made in their relationship that are solid reasons why I do things the way I do now with my relationship because I don't want to do that. It was like, that's not healthy. That's not cool. I learned from that.
Yeah.
Now, well, I guess the parent one's a little different because I did suffer.
Yeah.
As they were figuring it out, right? They're just people trying to figure things out like everybody else.
Right.
So I guess I did learn through suffering on that. And maybe it goes down to the people you care about, right? So if you see somebody you don't know at all versus someone that you actually care for, and if you see the person you don't know at all make the mistake, are you really going to learn? Because you don't really necessarily care for them. You're like, well, that was dumb.
You got no skin in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Where somebody, you might learn that lesson from them a little differently. So are we talking about it goes into the connections?
Sure.
With people, and that's how we learn. What's suffering, I guess, is what it is,
right?
Yeah. So you got the trust fund kid, right? Them suffering is they don't have the newest Porsche.
No.
They're suffering, dude. Like, man, this is real suffering for them.
Yeah. Or their dad wasn't around. Their mom wasn't around. They're all out there making the money to buy or not buy the new Porsche. But
you know,
which is suffering. Maybe to some people it doesn't look like they suffered because they had a mansion their whole life and everything they ever wanted, but they suffered in a different way.
They're suffering.
That's a fair point. That suffering, like most words, that all words are made up, but most words, they're subjective to the individual, right? And subjective to the lens that they look at things through based off of their experience.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, we'll get a psychiatrist. I'll bring my buddy Adam. He's a psychologist.
Oh,
He's got a comedy club now. Every time I talk to him, I call it comedian philosophy because he'll break some shit down.
Yeah, man.
He was the one that was telling me about anxiety in the future and depression in the past, and he's wrote a couple books, and he just has this really good outlook on the human mind. And I like talking to people like that, but people with minds can have their own opinions, especially experience some things.
That's interesting, man. If it wasn't art, it would have been psychology.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
I just like the mind.
Yeah.
When you start learning about the difference in mental illnesses and the way that people perceive the world. I like those things that are kind of intangibly tangible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you.
I can't go down the road, but the very, very limited knowledge I have of like quantum physics, things like that. That's like this. I should be able to put my hands right through this right now, but I can't because I love those kinds of things. Or even dealing with going back to the kind of human mind, man. It's just that everything is so subjective. You take an intro psychology 101. You're gonna swear every single person you know has all these mental illnesses. You just learn these. Wow, my uncle has that. That's my mom. Oh man, that's my brother. I mean, that's my kid.
Or every human, man.
Every human, right? Everybody's got something, and so that's one of the funny things about you start learning about psychology is you start trying to psychoanalyze everybody.
Sure.
Because everybody fits into some form of whatever it is.
Of course, that's why they made that sickness or whatever it is. That's why they invented that.
But thinking about the concepts of, so my wife has had the say privilege or whatever of working with people that had severe mental health illnesses, right? Really, really stuff. And coming to some things where these people believe they're right, but they sound crazy because what they're talking about is not real, but in their minds, it is real. And that's what makes them crazy.
The fact that in their own minds, it's reality.
It's reality. And you can't, you're the one that's messed up.
But don't isn't that like a lot of how our minds work?
Yeah.
Just in general. And I know people can have chemical imbalances and things can be out of whack, or something that happened to them can cause different developmental stuff. I fully get it.
Yeah.
But I think there is some built into us all, no matter how your life went, some things to be depressed about, some things to be anxious about. Dude, we're spinning on a ball in the middle of space right now, like with satellites that some rich man shot up in his dick-shaped rocket, dude, what are we even talking about? And there's a war going on. Like who would have thought that I did not think that I would see another war like we're seeing now. And the way we left Afghanistan, like with people falling off the jets, like civilians falling off when we're pulling out of there. That was the last image of war, and now we have a new one, white people killing white people in a country far away. It's I would have never thought I'd see that in today's day and age.
It's interesting, man. I don't know that. So kind of one of the things I think is real interesting about this, that there's been a lot of countries and different things that look at what's going on, and it's not even, it's the people in the country, not the country governments, but people, right, that are looking at this war and are really upset about it, okay? Not that war's something to be happy about, but depending on what side of the pocket that you're on.
Sure.
Right? Okay.
If you're Putin, he might be happy. Who knows?
Yeah, right?
I seen that dude riding a horse with no shirt on. He looks like he's having a good time.
Like a G, man. Yeah. So
he looks like he's having a good time.
So anyways, man, but what I think is, and so I was thinking, why? What's making this different, right? Because the Middle East has always kind of been at war. There's always been something going on, but it's been constant. I think this is the first time, like you're saying right now, that a lot of people are actually seeing something you only read about in history books, a country physically standing up and walking over and saying, mine.
I'm going to take this.
I'm going to take this.
I need this.
Yeah, I think this should be mine. I'm going to go do that. and people are dying in the process of it, and things are falling apart. And I think that in itself, that image and the whole concept of, wow, this is really, really happening in 2022. I don't know what makes 2022 so advanced, but anyways, we're farther along than we were in 1942, right?
Yes, I think that you would hope through the world wars, through all the everything. I guess the hope would be is at some point we all realize that we have more in common than we think.
Yeah.
But I think people's greed and ambition and the lack of ability to see someone else's point of view because they were born somewhere, they look different or whatever, some wars have been caused over. Yeah. You would hope that would change over time, but I don't know. It just seems like some people are so, I don't know if tribal is the word, maybe, it's,
that might be a good way to put
it. They want to be, they have their origin, they have their ethnicity, they have their country, and this is what they stand for, and they want that city in Ukraine for whatever reason, and they deserve it,
Yeah, it just seems so like archaic, right?
Seems just like a stupid way to think about things.
Yeah,
does it?
Like, I don't know, man. It feels like just being a bully at that point, But at the same, I don't know.
Some people like being bullies.
Yeah. Some people thrive off of that, but then also, what don't we know?
Sure.
Right? When we go layer for layer for layer and really start digging it down, what don't we know that's really going on back there, or there were certain things that we're going to see what we see on the surface?
And that's the hard part about today's day and age is you don't know what to trust, and I think we've learned that over the last few years more than we've ever known it in the past. Maybe that's a good thing of the internet is like all of this misinformation that's going around kind of gets you to realize that I think everybody kind of knew that the government maybe keeps stuff, lies about things, gets elected on false promises that they know they're not going to be able to keep. But the media, I don't think back in the 50s, if you turned on, well, I don't know if CNN was around the 50s, whatever, ABC, CNN, you sat around, you watched the news. I don't think people had the slightest idea that what they're telling you might not be the truth. But now,
trusted, man, especially if it comes to the government. So I think, man, you start looking at World War I, World War II. We were of the mindset, and again, if I lived in that day, maybe it would be different. I don't know. But I feel like at that point, people felt that the government had the people's best interest in mind. So the government was trusted. It was an honor to fight for the government. It was an honor to do these things, right, during those time frames. And maybe this is a direct cause of the media, but as we kind of go along, it's people have more now, just a distrust of the government.
Yes.
It's not... Before, I feel like in 100 years ago, right, 1920s, we're sitting here. I think when the government released something, think about like the dietary guidance and all this stuff. People just went with it. You were like, oh, the government, that's the government. They're right. They're good. They got the smartest people. They have our best interests. It's going to make us a better country. Let's do it, right? Now, dietary is like, well, who? Why? Yeah. Why is this? Is it to feed the corporations that are now,
But back then, if you go back, because people couldn't look that kind of stuff up, the breakfast is the most important meal of the day is the one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
The research behind that, back whenever that came out, maybe the 20s, I don't know.
Yeah.
Was all funded by like Kellogg's or these big freaking companies that back then, when people didn't, it wasn't easily to look up. You're like, oh, where does the funding for this, data set come from? Yeah. Now you can look at all that stuff. But you can't tell me that Kellogg's in the 20s or 30s, whenever breakfast was the most important meal, wasn't like biased towards, whatever made more sense for people to buy more Kellogg's, which was breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
And now there's people that come out now that say that that's total horseshit.
Oh, absolutely. So what's right? No,
who do you believe?
Who do you believe?
Who do you believe?
So there's a book that I had looked at. They kind of promotes a vegetarian lifestyle, right? And so, but the way that it's set up is it breaks it down like scientifically. It has some dry stuff in it, studies that I glanced through because I was like, I don't need to know the numbers, just get to the meat, right? Words I can understand, right? So,
I skipped data in analytics in school. I only did art and left. I gotcha.
Right on. So one of the things that they had brought up was how it's where things have gotten connected through corporations, and how a lot of our, especially in the Western side of America, right, a lot of our dietary perceptions are directly kind of created from corporations and lobbying and stuff, right? So one of the examples was milk, right? We're growing up, you gotta drink milk. It prevents osteoporosis and keeps your bones strong, and all this stuff, right? So you think, okay, we're drinking milk. Everybody's drinking milk. Milk. Well, on a global study, the countries with the highest percentages of osteoporosis are the ones that consume the most milk. And it was just strictly because the dairy corporations had their hand in the funding and promotions of stuff. And so it goes back to Kellogg's making breakfast the most important thing of the day.
Yes.
Right?
But how much of our thought process is shaped on that? Or let's just say the 400 million Americans that are alive and generational. I think that's changing with the internet, but there's still a lot of us that have things built into us that we don't even know why we think that, or what was influencing us to think that way. And you can go back to cigarettes, you know. There used to be tobacco companies that had cigarettes. Like there's a Fred Flintstone commercial you could watch where he's smoking a cigarette. I think he's handing it to Barney Rubble or whatever, you know.
Man, go back to the Looney Tunes. They're rolling their own cigarettes.
But see, exactly. And, you know, and car companies was the big one. I think it was Elon that was saying that the car companies, they knew that seatbelts were more, they would save lives. But the car companies lobbied against seatbelts successfully for 5 or 10 years before they had to be put in the cars because it would cost them more money. It would eat into their profits. And I was like, what? So how many people died in the early ages of cars, you know, just because these companies could do those kind of things?
Oh, shit ton.
A shit ton. A shit ton.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you start going into the health and well-being, right? So cancer's always been something that's there, right? It's a problem. And you look at how, I'm glad, I think there's a shift happening with millennials kind of getting older and things changing a little bit. But and cancer's still rampant. But there was a lot of like obesity in our country, the high levels of diabetes, cancers of different types that weren't like almost unheard of before that are more and more common. And you think of how that coincides with the generations of, we had food that we cooked, then fast food comes along. Then processed food comes along to keep longer shelf life, make things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to produce. It's mass produced longer and longer. We naturally are just eating it. So when you're thinking about all these fast food joints, think about in the 80s and 90s. We just didn't know any better. We thought, it's a hamburger. It should be just like the hamburger I made at home. No, it's full of all kinds of shit.
Yes.
That's going to be detrimental to your health.
Yes.
But we didn't think twice about it.
Right.
And now we eat it, consume it. Fast forward, now we got all this obesity, man. We're big. We're big and we're unhealthy, man.
Yeah.
You know, so, and all that comes from that. But now we're kind of getting out of it because people started getting wise and hip to it.
I would hope so.
Understanding. I hope so too, man. I hope so too.
If anything, I think the government missed the COVID season as like, or anybody, it doesn't have to be the government, the opportunity to finally say that. Listen, if you're a little bit healthier, eat a little bit better, exercise a little bit more. I'm not saying you're not going to get COVID, but your chances of fighting it off and recovering, it's clear. The data is there. A better immune system will help you, you know, versus, an underlying condition of obesity or anything else that can be. And diet and exercise doesn't fix everything. No. And there's some people that believe that medical intervention is needed. But I hope that society realized that a little bit more through this last season of life. That, man, you should put a little bit of resources into this.
Well, I think that, you know, there's some folks out there that, it depends on what side of the fence you're on when you hear these things, right? But now you're talking about preventative medicine, preventative measures. Right. But that doesn't make more money. And we want to react to the people who are already sick to make more money.
You hit the nail on the head. You know? Look at how much money Pfizer makes.
Yeah.
You know, look how much money any of these drug companies make, you know, and for a long time, you know. You know, the whole opioid crisis, Pfizer was a big contributor into that.
They knew, just like they knew people were dying when the seatbelts weren't in place. They were like, more money, right? Kind of make that happen.
But that's back to the money.
Yeah.
That's back to the money.
I think that, man, it's crazy when you start thinking about those things where it's this greed. Like, how much money do we really need to have and make? And this money's subjective, and I get that, man. Absolutely. You know, And I guess really maybe what the problem is you have these companies who have these shareholders. So really the whole point is to make them as much money. So it's at any cost possible to make the money to meet these goals and demands. But who's really hurting from this? It's going to be the people.
The consumer.
The consumer. You know, all those things get passed on to us and we just keep eating them up literally.
No.
You know?
No.
So yeah, man, going into like, if we're preventative with our health and well-being, then you can eliminate a lot. Take some vitamins, exercise a little bit more, right?
Eat a little less fast food.
Eat a little less fast food. Eat a little bit more fruits and vegetables. You know, kind of get into a variety of the diet to where it was. So, because think about, man, when you look at movies and stuff, right? And movies that were filmed in the 30s and 40s, man, there weren't very many big people.
No.
You see footage like raw street footage of cities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You got a lot of wiry dudes and people running around because they didn't have any of that other crap they were doing, man.
The average weight of the soldiers in the Civil War, I'm pretty sure, was 130 pounds.
Yeah.
Men.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Yeah.
What's the average weight of soldiers today? It's probably 190, 200.
Yeah.
I mean, because we know more. We know more about health and wellness overall, and we have more access to things.
Yep.
But what percentage of people do you think their main source of food is probably fast food?
Oh man, I have no idea, but they're out there.
It's got to be high.
There's out there, or
it's got to be high.
Or let's look at this, right? You're tight on money. This whole money thing. Money keeps going. Okay, you're tight on money. Dollar menus.
4 for $4s.
And you got 3 kids in the back, and you got to feed them, right? And you can buy 3 apples. That'll get them fed, or you can buy for the price of those 3 solid apples. That'll probably cost you $6 for 3 good solid apples. You know what I mean? Like nice big apples that'll, you know. But you're looking at, well, I can get a whole kid's meal for all 3 of them for the same price.
But it seems like, and I heard a nutritionalist say this, I don't remember who it was, that like the mass-produced fast food is less nutrient-rich. That's not a surprise.
Yeah.
But that's why you feel like you have to eat more of it.
Yeah.
So then people are in this cycle of their bodies aren't getting the right amount of nutrients, and they're eating all of this stuff that's minimal in nutrients versus eating 2 apples would maybe do the same thing as 5 Big Macs or whatever, as an example.
So I think it's part of the environment too.
Sure.
You're a parent. Your kids got to eat. Let's get them some food.
Yeah.
Now you stop and think about it. You're right. Let's go buy a head of broccoli and chop up some, and then maybe get some lunch meat or something. I don't know, which is still processed, but you know, something a little bit more cleaner, I guess, if that's a thing, right? So that's going to be less food, but they'll be fuller because there's higher nutrients.
Right.
But we don't think that way, right? I guess in America, it's all about volume.
Yeah.
Well, or ignorance. People don't know any different. They don't understand those things, and they're just like, well, it's food. I know that they say it's bad for me, but we've always eaten it. Sure. Everybody's always eating it around me. You know,
how could McDonald's be bad? It's such a great corporation. They used to have a Ronald McDonald rolling around. You know?
Toys for the kids, man.
But I think ignorance plays a role. Money definitely plays a role. That's a fair point to make in people's dietary choices. And time, you know, it's such a convenient thing to be able to go to a restaurant. But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is it took away all the hardship of getting that, of getting food, of growing stuff, of fighting through a tough winter, of preparing for a long winter if you live somewhere where it's cold, you know, where your next meal is going to come from. Now that we don't have that, that's maybe why people are so anxious or so depressed, because we don't have that struggle. We don't have that, you know, we got to go kill that bison,
that
you know.
Struggle,
the healthy, the reward of it, you know, the old phrase of pressure makes diamonds, you know. I think balance. I think life and a lot of this stuff we're talking about is about balance. You can have a little bit of sugar, or you can have enough sugar that it'll freaking kill you, you know. And you can say that about anything. And they fought wars over sugar in the past, you know. Like, that's how much people are like, damn, like this stuff, we need this. But I think balance is the key to anything, man. You know, and you can go down the board. You know, too much of anything is a bad thing, I think, in a lot of cases. My kids and I have this, and we're like, what about too much love? And I'm like, if you are leading with too much love towards somebody and someone takes advantage of you, you know, because of the niceness and the kindness, then that would be considered an unbalanced approach when it comes to love, right? So we have these kind of conversations about balance, but love is the one they throw back at me.
I dig it, right? So even just real quick on that, man, I get the thought of an enabler, right? They love that person so much that they just refuse to see them fail. So they continue to enable them to have these bad behaviors because they love them so much.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an imbalance at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's too much love there because you're so afraid of letting them fail, so afraid of seeing them suffer. You love them so much that you don't let them get the suffering.
Yes.
To understand it.
But that seems like a natural thing with parenting. Again, you see like what do they call it? A helicopter parent. That's always above everything.
Yeah.
They pad the corners of stuff because they don't want their kids to hit the head or whatever. But then you have the other side, like shit. If they hit their head on that, they're gonna know to watch out for that before it. Maybe they'll have a concussion or ruin them for the rest of their life. But you know what I mean? Like you can understand the desire to like shelter your kids or enable them. You know, it's like damn, like it's life is harder than I think people want to say. I think people realize it, but they don't ever like conceptualize it.
Yeah.
It's simple and hard at the same time.
Interesting, man. I had this conversation a couple of days ago with my wife. So my daughter's 17, right? And she's like, I'm going to go out and hang out with my friends. I'm like, all right. But she just kind of came out and just said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to hang out. And I'm like, okay. So she said, okay, just be careful, and it happened a couple times that this exact kind of stuff. She comes out, hey, I'm going to go hang out with a childhood friend of hers that lives down the street. I know she's not getting into trouble or doing stuff. We hope. I don't know. She's not got caught, so that's the main thing, right? So
that's half the battle.
That's half the battle.
Come on, man. You know those days.
Yeah. So anyways, I looked at Monica and I said, man, I got to ask you something. Is it okay that she just comes out and tells us she's leaving without going in here? Are you comfortable with that? And she was like, well, yeah, she doesn't really go out much. She doesn't do. I know who she's with and what she's doing, and she keeps in touch and stuff like that. And I said, I know. She said, why? Is there a problem? Should we not let her do that? I go, I really don't know. I'm asking because I didn't have any kind of guidance and structure. I did what I want when I wanted to. So I'm actually kind of figuring out, am I being overbearing right now? I don't know. Am I just being overprotective? I'm asking because I really want to know. Because if I am, I'll let it go.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm trying to figure that out by asking these questions.
And getting her opinion and what she thinks. Because she was the opposite, where she had, more control over what she was doing and not doing, I think.
So she just had, I don't want to say like my parents weren't involved in my life, but they weren't at the same time. Where I was, as a kid, I was,
like you said, they had their own
things, and I got into trouble and stuff, and because I was just figuring it out. So she had more of the structure and still does, where her parents are married, strong relationship. There's issues with perceptions on how they see things, but that's a whole other can of worms, right? But the whole thing is that she had that family structure, traditional family structure.
Right.
And so that's where I'm relying on her for that. Your parents were involved in what you were doing. They cared. I just left and did what I wanted. If I came home, I came home. If I didn't, I didn't. Or I'd come home just to not get in trouble, then run back out the window or something because but nobody knew.
Right.
And I just was doing what I wanted to do.
Right.
Some I guess like I'm a bad kid. I wasn't a bad kid. I just was trying to hang out. And nobody was watching.
Yeah. It's a therapy session. You finally realized you were a bad kid.
Oh my God.
No, but I think it's back to that balance. If you are too strict, where you got to tell me everything you're doing, you got to be home by 6 p.m. Like there's an extreme of strictness on that, but then there's the other extreme where it gives the perception that they don't care.
Yeah.
And that I wouldn't think that would be the approach that I would want to take.
Yeah.
More of a balance. If you want to tell me, tell me. If you're getting some shit, you can tell me. Just tell me the truth. Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think it's a balance. My opinion on that would probably be a balance of the two.
It is. It was just kind of thinking through what we're talking about as far as how interesting it is. Like. Right.